And by the way, my name is Deborah Perlman, and welcome to the podcast, The Entrepreneurial Oomph. And today I am so blessed and grateful to have a wonderful woman who we were talking before, and we believe it's been over 15 years since we've seen and talked to each other. And I'm so grateful for Devora Lindeman being here, and I so appreciate your spending time with us. And if you want to share a little bit about who you are and just maybe give an intro of the business that you're currently in and have been for a big number of years, I think that the listeners and the viewers would really appreciate that from you.
Thank you so much, Deborah, for inviting me on this podcast. I really have a very strong place in my heart for entrepreneurs and business professionals. I am an employment lawyer for businesses. I've been a lawyer for 30 years, just practicing this kind of law. I will say, however, that law is not my first career. I have many years doing other things, working for a nonprofit, for example, before I went to law school. I also used to be many years ago a dancer and choreographer.
You were, I didn't know that about you. That's awesome.
So I went to college actually for a dance program. But you don't make a lot of money as a dancer, especially if you're just in the chorus and not, the number one dancer. So at some point in my 30s, I decided to go to law school. That was a big pivot for me. And the lesson there I just want to share is that if what you're doing isn't working, you can change. You can do whatever you want. You can make a change in your life. And going to law school was wonderful for me. I loved it. I love learning. And I consider being a lawyer a helping profession. I really want to help my business clients do better and do it right by their employees. There's so many, ridiculous laws that apply if you have employees. It can be just a labyrinth. So I help businesses untangle those. I help them work with that. And right now I'm a partner at the law firm of Greenwald Doherty. We're based in New York, but we have lawyers in a number of different states. I happen to be physically in Kentucky now. I left New York about 5 years ago. I am admitted to practice law in New York, New Jersey, and Kentucky. But when it comes to compliance and what do you do with your pregnant employee? What happens if somebody gets hurt? What happens if you think the bookkeeper is stealing or somebody comes to work drunk? Like, what do you do? I'm the lawyer that you call. What do I do? How do I handle this so I don't get sued? That's what I do.
Interesting. So why, okay, it's a two-part question. What had you leaving the dance and the choreography world and then pivot, like why the pivot to law, and then why pivot to employment law? Because that's a very specialized niche of the law area, right? The law profession.
Okay, so let me break apart those questions because yes, question. So when I was going to college and focusing on dance, and I'm a college dropout. Now, obviously, to go to law school, I had to go back and finish. But I was in college in the 70s, so it was a long time ago. And when I was a junior, I didn't know what I wanted to do really with my life. I had friends who were seniors, they were graduating, and they couldn't get jobs. I had a job the summer between my junior and senior year, working for a nonprofit for artists in New York City. And they offered me a full-time job. Yeah. Even though, initially I had a summer job and then they offered to extend it. And I thought, why not? What's one more year of college going to buy me when I have a job now? So I took that job, which was administrative. My summer job was as a receptionist. Where's a college kid going to start? But then they trained me on the job with all kinds of management and administration. I was there for 11 years, eventually became head of their finance department. Me, who hated math, became head of the finance department for a nonprofit. but with the right training, you can do anything. And they were patient and kind and trained me, and they needed somebody in that role and convinced me to give it a shot, which I did. So in that process of transitioning from college to this nonprofit administrative kind of job, they had the ability for different people to do showcases there, showcase their talent. It was a nonprofit for artists. And I did a number of dance shows, which was pretty exciting. But I decided that dance wasn't really where my career was going to go. So that's how I pivoted out of dance into something else. How I got into law, which I think was the other part of your question.
Yeah, because it's a big shift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got pregnant. I the job was in New York City. My husband and I were living in Rockland County outside of the city. I got pregnant and was commuting, first pregnant and then with an infant. They actually had an on-site nursery, which not a lot of places did.
Yeah.
However, they were not able to necessarily get a nanny that kind of could get the kids under control. And I think she had three kids of various infant toddler stages. So anytime my kid had a problem, she would take the kid and show up in my office. And that kind of didn't work for me. You know, we were supposed to have lunch with the kids or whatever. Anyway, so I wound up leaving that job because it just wasn't working for me. I went to work for my dad, who was a lawyer. First
Ah.
as his office manager, because his office manager had just quit. And he asked me if I could help him out for a little bit till he decided what he wanted to do. And then one day he had some legal work that needed to be done and asked me if I could help him write this brief. And I said, help you do a what? You know?
What's a brief? Isn't that like a kind of underwear? I don't know. What are you talking about?
Anyway, and the thing is, I remember one of the things he did was criminal law, and it was a brief trying to explain to the judge how the police had done a traffic stop and a breathalyzer wrong. That was what the brief was on. And I had to look up case law on what a proper breathalyzer, you know, if you get stopped and the police officer thinks you're drunk and makes you breathe into something. Anyway, I found it fascinating. And then he began to train me as a paralegal, because you can get trained as a paralegal on the job. You don't necessarily have to get a paralegal certificate. And one day he was going to have to do a deposition, which is part of a litigation where you get to ask questions of people on the other side, get some information for your case. And he looked at me and he said, I wish I could send you to this deposition. I just got too much to do. And I said, you know, if I was a lawyer, you could. And it was sort of that instant. Really, it was like that instant that I decided maybe I should look into going to law school. I mean, at that point, I had two kids, and I think they were around 6 and 2, something like that, 7 and 3. And I said, okay, I'm gonna look into going to law school. And I did. So I went to law school full-time days because it was shorter. There's a night program, but it takes longer to get through the night program. And after I graduated law school, I clerked for a judge for a year. And then I actually went right to an employment law firm. When I was looking at what kind of lawyer I wanted to be at that point, I had worked for my dad. That was the only real experience I had with the law. And he did what some people call door law. He did whatever walked in the door.
Okay, I never heard that term before.
I hadn't heard it until years
Wow. Okay.
after I actually left him. So he did some criminal law, he did some matrimonial, he wrote some wills, he did personal injury, you know, kind of whatever walked in the door. He would do. So I realized working for him that I didn't want to do that. I wanted to focus on something. I also couldn't take the matrimonial law. It was too emotional for me, and I just couldn't deal with the families and the kids, and it was just awful. I also didn't want to do criminal law, just not my thing. And I also didn't want to litigate like commercial corporate law, like why didn't the widgets arrive on Tuesday? I really didn't care. I had to do something I cared about. So when I graduated law school, I clerked for a judge for a year in the federal court in New Jersey. And when you're working with a judge, what you're doing as a law clerk is you're basically listening to the arguments, reading briefs that lawyers submit. Then the judge tells you how he or she wants a rule, and you write an opinion that supports what the judge wants it to say.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I think a lot
That's
of people don't know that.
Yeah, so the judge is the one making the decision, but
Hmm.
then the law clerk is taking the first stab at writing the brief, writing the opinion,
Hmm.
because the judges doesn't have time to do everything. Obviously, the judge reads it, makes edits, tells you what to do, but you're taking the first stab at it. So I was dealing with a whole lot of different areas of law. And also, the judge I worked for suggested what different types of law I should consider going into, suggested a number of law firms I should apply to. And so I kind of spent that year figuring out what I wanted to do because I didn't have a job after the clerkship. And employment law for businesses was one of the things he recommended. There was a very prominent law firm in New Jersey that he suggested I apply to. I have no idea if he called somebody and said, hire this person. But
So wait. Do you remember the judge's name? Are you allowed to share it?
yeah, Stanley Chesler, it's on my LinkedIn page so
So
people can.
he really it was a blessing. He did you wow.
He was wonderful. I can't
Wow.
say enough wonderful things for him. He's now, I think, on senior status, which is what new federal judges go on senior status before they retire.
Yeah.
When I clerked for him, he was a magistrate judge, so the not to demean anything, the low judge on the totem pole. And he's since moved up the chain, but he was wonderful to work for, very supportive of me.
Yeah.
And
So that I just want to stay here for a second because so okay, so for the viewers and the listeners, right? I just want to expand on that because you don't know what impact you could have, like the judge had for you, right? So, as human beings, and we're walking on this earth, and we're also busy, and we're trying to, as entrepreneurs, we're making phone calls, we're scheduling appointments, we're doing the work, we're doing the marketing, we're leveraging our time. Hopefully, we have some administrative support, and just something that you say or something that you do it can have a huge impact on somebody's life. And you're a great example of that because he really put a big ripple in the water for you.
he
So
did. And I always try to give back. If somebody reaches out to me, say a college student, and they do, I'm considering going to law school. What does that mean? What should I take in college to prepare myself? I'm happy to talk to that person. I've also talked to people who are looking for jobs. I recently spoke to someone who got laid off from a federal agency. She was an employment lawyer and she wanted some advice on her job search. I'm always happy to talk to people, to network. If I can help someone, I think that's very important. We're put on this earth, and I think helping others is one of the reasons that we're here.
yeah, I would agree with that. And I think most people that I speak to and all of my clients, they want to be in service to others. I think, and so the entrepreneur, the business leader, somebody who, like what you're doing, you're stepping in and you're doing it because you want to be in service to others. And for you, it's helping businesses to, um, I guess, without not just lawfully, but I think they most of the time, and correct me if I'm wrong, most of the time when an employer needs to either correct a situation with an employee, right, or a consultant or a contracted employee, they're not looking to hurt the person. And so I think being mindful of the law for both sides is important. And so I think for any entrepreneur who has a passion, most people go into business or are looking for soul fulfilling work that's in service to others. And I think that's in any industry, in any profession globally. I don't think it matters what you're doing. So I think if you're filling your cup and living a life that's in alignment for you, like you are, and you have been for 30 years, right? I think that's a beautiful gift. And then at the very beginning, you said we all can. We all can shift and pivot and make the changes so that when we wake up in the morning, we're happy to have another day and we're happy to be able to be in service to others and ripple out and leave. You know, Maya Angelou has a saying, and I hope I don't butcher it. It's something to the effect of, if you want to leave a legacy, leave a mark that can't be erased. And I think what you leave on people's souls and what you're doing is that. You know, it's simple. And so the part of you that is most fulfilled, the part of you that feels most in alignment with what you're doing and how you're serving your clients, what is that part of you? What's being filled?
Um, Helping business owners sleep better at night, actually,
Mhm.
because all of us lawyers at Greenwald Doherty, and there's 8 of us. We're not a huge firm, but that's not little either. All of us want to see our business clients flourish and prosper. Unlike other employment law firms that what I call they play catch. A client gets sued, throws the complaint at the lawyer catches and goes off and running in court. We want to help our clients before they get sued. We want the business owner to focus on, like you said, what do they do with an employee? Employee gets in a car accident, let's say, and can't come to work.
Yeah.
What are the legal obligations? Clearly, the business wants to run their business and at the same time figure out what they need to do for this employee under whatever laws apply. But also, usually they do care about the employee. This employee's been hurt. Maybe he or she has a family. You know, what do they have to do to support this person and see if they can come back to work? So we work at what I call the intersection of business advice and legal advice, because
Nice.
we want to help our clients succeed, and we want to help those business owners and managers not go to sleep at night worrying, oh my goodness, Josie's going to sue me because of XYZ.
That's nice. So the part of you that is doing this, you wake up in the morning and you're happy to do this. Um, when you think about your best client, your ideal client, like, is there a specific size of a business? Like, well, how do you know that it's going to be a good client for you?
That's a good question. Um, it really depends, because our best client is one that wants to do things right. They may not currently be doing things right. They may currently be violating the laws and they actually don't know it, but they want to make sure that they're doing it right for the company and they're doing it right for their employees. So that's kind of the first thing. You know, we don't want a client that comes to us and says, for example, I have all these employees I'm paying under the table off the books, and I want you to help me figure out how to keep doing that.
No, that's not legal. I thought it was.
You know, so if somebody's, you know, that is a big extreme. But
Hmm.
you know, if somebody's going to tell us that they really don't want to follow the law, I
Yeah.
don't know that we can help them.
Yeah.
So
Not
that's
the ideal client. Yeah.
not my ideal client. In
It's
terms
crazy.
in terms of the size, on the one hand, we have clients that could be a mom and pop bakery with 5 employees or a dentist office with 2 employees. Once you have employees, you have employee issues. We also have clients with thousands of employees all over the US. So I would probably say if we're looking at numbers, our ideal client is somewhere between 30 and 500 employees,
Okay.
but that doesn't have in-house employment counsel. Because once they have in-house counsel, then they don't need an outside lawyer. They've got somebody
Okay.
inside, and they use their outside lawyer for litigation, which we do, but we don't want to do, and we want to keep our clients protected so they don't get sued.
Yeah. So you would rather have the clients for, okay, so you're outsourced for
Well,
your,
and people engage us where we have a law
yep.
firm. People engage the law firm to help them. And we provide services on a number of different ways. Lawyers have the old billable hour model, where we charge by the hour, and we do that. But we also have certain subscription services that clients can engage us for, where they pay a flat monthly fee and get certain compliance services for that fee. We have a variety of ranges depending on what the client needs. So we do that. And we also provide certain things on a flat fee basis. For example, an employee handbook or an agreement, confidentiality agreement or something. So we try to work with our clients and make a relationship with them. We want this to be an ongoing relationship.
So I just, it's so interesting. So your demeanor is so calm, and I'm going to ask you a question. And I don't know. You seem very steady, and you seem very like you're very like that. Have you ever been triggered by a client not doing what they needed to do and not listening? Because I mean, that happens, right?
Sure. And that again is a compound question.
I know. I like to do those.
Objection, compound. I don't get triggered easily. I've also taken courses and gotten coaching and various things to get where I am today. So I wasn't always this calm and steady. But what I say is to clients, it's not everybody listens to me. It's your company, it's not mine. It's your choice. I don't make business choices for our clients. I just give them the advice, tell them what the law is, tell them what their options are, both from a legal perspective and a business perspective, because some of their choices are going to have business ramifications, not just legal ramifications. So they have to think through these consequences and make a choice. It's their choice. They can do what they want. That's my opinion. I don't yell at people. I don't get angry. Sometimes I get a little aggravated. I am from New York.
You are from New York originally. That's right. So yes, you're entitled to a little bit of that.
We get a little dramatic sometimes.
Yeah, I know. It's fun though. And sometimes it's okay to get like that. And I think so not that long ago, I had a client who, I'm just going to put it out there, had two sets of books. Two sets of books. I know that you've probably run into that, right? And I'm talking about a very specific community in New York, and in an area not far from where we both lived and met. And I there's only so much, just like you said, it's their business. And you want them to do what's best for them, and you want to help them to see the options. And I think with you having all of that experience working with businesses, you've probably seen almost every situation that could possibly occur. So, is there anything that has surprised you over the years?
That's a good question because interestingly, I was talking to a colleague about 2 weeks ago saying that, after practicing law for 30 years, you would think I've seen everything. But that week, I got 2 inquiries from clients with things I had never seen before. So there's always something new. So to answer your question of if anything surprises me, well, first off, I don't think anything would surprise me anymore. What I'm thinking of wasn't surprising, probably wasn't the right adjective, but a client reached out because their partner had an affair with their office manager, but then now they wanted to fire the office manager.
Oh,
How do they do that? And P.S., they were both married and their spouses didn't know, and there were complications.
Wow, this sounds like a soap opera.
So very often we get soap opera questions.
Ah,
We have to figure out how to untangle them.
okay. So I know this is going to sound very small of me, but that must have been a very interesting case to work on.
They're often very interesting, and sometimes clients, again, like I say, sometimes they take our advice and sometimes they say, thank you, we'll think about it. That kind of makes sense. And then I never hear from them again. And I don't know what they did or didn't do.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's so interesting. I think sometimes, even before they would go to an attorney, so I'm just going to make a generalization and correct me if any of what I'm saying is wrong. Okay. My experience with self-motivated, driven, high D CEOs and business owners is they still think they know what's best. And they've got a little ego and they've got some pride mixed in there. And the fact that they think that in most cases, I've met a few that know better. Most of the CEOs that I've had the opportunity to work with way in the past were more uh, I know what's best. This is my company. I know what's best. I'm gonna take your advice, but yeah, I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do anyway. And I finally realized that it wasn't me, it was them. And I started manifesting and looking for different clients. I want clients who want to do better, who want to grow, who want to expand, who want to learn to do things differently that might ripple out and have actually a more positive impact on their business, their employees, their teams, their lives, because I believe that the business and the personal side are very intertwined. So I when you talk about those opportunities for you to sit back and you're an observer and there's not more than that you can give. So I and if you get frustrated or I mean you have to have some detachment because always you can't control the outcome of that situation of any of those because right? You can only control what you can control. So when you see somebody really making a mistake and they're not following your advice and you know that you can't do anything to shift that because some people just have to learn the hard way, right? How do you separate that and not take that home with you?
that's a good question. But let me back up and answer a question that you didn't ask, and then I'll answer that
Okay,
question.
that's
That's
I love that. I love that.
which is, how do I manage the situation for the client? And what I do is write an email to that person outlining the issue and the problem, what we recommend, the fact that they told me they're not going to follow directions or they want to do XYZ. Here are the risks of doing that. Here are the benefits of the other options. It's your business. Do what you want. God bless. Not necessarily in those words. So
I
that
like those words. Those are good words. Okay.
so we have in writing the advice that we gave. So
So,
that
okay.
if they come back and say, why didn't you tell me I could get sued over this? You can pull up the email and say, oh, I did. So there you go. So that's one thing is I make sure that there's an email, and I do this also in other situations because often, actually, let me back up. A lot of the advice I give is on Zoom like this or over the phone, and sometimes people hear what they want to hear. So when you put
They always hear what they want to hear.
Okay, always hear what they want to hear.
Yeah.
So I always put it in writing most of the time, especially
Yeah.
if it's a newer client, so they have that. They can read it, they can read it again, they can then answer, say, wait, I don't understand what you mean by blah, 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 and I can explain. So that's one piece of it. Now, how do I not take it home? First off, I can't tell you I don't.
Yeah.
I
And
can't tell you
you're human. You're human.
I don't wake up in the middle of the night worried about a client issue. Um, Sometimes what I do though is I take my phone and I email myself either what I'm worried about, or sometimes I will have thought of a solution. I'm sitting there worried, I'm tossing and turning, I'm going, well, what about this? What about that? Oh, maybe we should do this. However, I can't guarantee I'm going to remember that when I wake up in the morning. So I take my phone, I email myself, I get it out of my mind into my phone, I can go back to sleep. So that's kind of how I manage that. I also, I care about my clients. I want to see them protected. That's my end goal. So I want to make sure that I'm giving them my all, that I'm doing everything I can to help them. But I do have to remember it's their business, it's their life. All I can do is give them information. They control their business and they're responsible for their business. I'm not. I can't control their business. I'm not responsible. All I can do is give them the knowledge I think they need to make decisions about what to do.
Yeah.
That's my role.
Yeah. I think that's very well said. Thank you for sharing that. And I think the clients that I have now, because it's interesting that when you start to really focus on what you do want, things start showing up, right? So words like manifesting, I know some people believe it, some people don't, but you know what, you're attracting what you're looking for. And the business owners and my clients who I have the absolute privilege of working with now are smart enough to know what they don't know. And they're smart enough to surround themselves with the people who are experts in other areas that enhance and supplement so that they have a team around them that, they work together. It's collaborative. It's not dictatorial. And yes, the final decisions and the final, the path that's going forward, the CEO has to, and the business owner and the team leader has to make that decision. And yet, I think we can, as business advisors and employment law and business coaches and consultants, and I think we can only do the best that we can. And as long as our clients know that we're doing it in their best interest, like you said, they have to walk their path. And I have seen people that have had to learn the lesson the hard way, and they come back to me and they're like, I wish I had made a different choice in the moment, but I thought I knew better, you know.
Yeah, we see that a lot. And another thing I'm also seeing is both human resources and business owners going to ChatGPT and asking them employment questions. And ChatGPT is wrong a lot,
Yeah.
doesn't understand the nuances, doesn't understand your business. So that's one thing people have to be mindful of, that they really shouldn't be asking ChatGPT. They should be asking a human, a human.
Somebody who actually went to school and studied the law. It's interesting that you bring that up, because it even says, like, so the example that you're using is ChatGPT, and there's a lot of platforms, right?
Yes, sure.
But there's a disclaimer on ChatGPT that please can check the information, because ChatGPT does make mistakes. It's the disclaimer. And I don't know how, I didn't notice it when I first started working with it, but I do use it. I have never used it to ask a law question, though. I can promise.
There's now a law pending in New York that was introduced that all these platforms are going to have a disclaimer on them that basically says, use at your risk. We're often wrong.
Yeah, I think that it's buyer beware, and I think that they right. Yeah, I think that's great. Okay. So if there's one last thing that you want to leave viewers and the listeners to take away with them, what's the one thing that you'd really like to make sure that people hear and understand and know?
Oh, that's a broad question. Let me think. Um, well, my path to get to being a partner at Greenwald Doherty is a long and winding one. It wasn't straight, it wasn't direct, and you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable in life.
I love
What
that.
I mean by that is that there are going to be times where you're going to say, I'm tired of doing this. I want to do something else. Or I can't do this anymore. Or look over there. That looks really interesting. Why don't I try that? And maybe that's right. And maybe you should. But maybe you should give what you're doing another chance. Maybe you need some coaching or some guidance or some help to be able to do what you're doing better. Or maybe you do need to pivot. And the thing is, I think people need to be willing to look and listen. They need to be willing to change and to pivot and to know that, as you said, they are the driver of their life. We have to own our own life, and it's our decisions about where we're going to go and what we're going to do. We can get advice from people, we can talk to people, we can think about the issues, but it's really our decisions that are going to drive where we get and how we get there. And sometimes where you get is so much better than where you were, which is actually what I think being a lawyer at Greenwald Doherty. I've been here since 2007, so
Wow.
a very long time. It's a great firm, and we really help our business clients. So I'm glad that I wound up here.
I'm just gonna just a last note, and thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate that. Your face lit up. So your face lit up because you're happy where you are, you're passionate about what you're doing, and the culture where you are is it seems like it's an extremely healthy, supportive environment. It's collaborative.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can see that in the way that your energy shifted, and you just had this big beautiful smile on your face. So I wanted to acknowledge that
Thank
because
you.
I think that organizations that have healthy cultures develop healthy, collaborative alignments with their employees, and then that ripples out to the clients. And I think that it's all part of that whole process.
Yeah, and one of the things we do is help our clients imbue their culture. Because culture isn't just something on the wall where we
Yep.
say we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it sits on the wall. We recommend, for example, that when you do employee evaluations, you've got to include whether those employees are following the culture or not. And during the year, when employees do things that really embody the culture, we want them to have a shout out. That was great that you just did this because it embodied, number 4. And when people don't, you also want to criticize them, just like you would if the report was awful or the report was late or some employee had some other kind of issue. If they're not embodying your culture, you have to performance manage them against that. So I know that's kind of an expanded off the question you asked, but
It's
it's
okay. It's all good. It's all good. But it's true. I mean, if you want to have a particular culture, everybody, and I used this analogy just the other day with another client. I said, everybody on your team is on a boat and they all have to have their oars in the boat, in the water, and they all have to be rowing at the same time in the same direction. And you're the captain. So what do you want to do to inspire and motivate them? And what's the culture you want them to feel so they all have some ownership in it. And if somebody's not rowing and they're just sitting there letting everybody else do the work, where's the PIP, the performance improvement plan? What do you do? What do you
exactly.
do? Because the culture is like the heart of the organization. And if you don't protect the heart of the organization, you won't have one very soon.
I love that analogy with the rowers in the boat.
Yeah.
That's a really good one.
You can use it. All right, Devora. So thank you again so much for spending time with us and for sharing and and being so insightful. And I love your energy. You're just very You're very grounded, and I really appreciate that. So if someone wants to get a hold of you and ask you questions, or maybe they're in one of the states, now you said you're in New York, New Jersey, and Kentucky, right?
Well, that's where I am, but I have partners admitted in a lot of other states.
Okay.
We practice up and down the Eastern Seaboard and Connecticut and Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Florida. We also have attorneys in North Carolina, Texas, California. So we kind of are all over. And if somebody reaches out to us and we can't help them, I've got a network that I often can refer somebody to.
Beautiful.
So somebody can go to my LinkedIn profile under my name, Devora Lindeman, that's on the box over there,
Yep.
or they can go to my website, Greenwald Doherty, which is GreenWald, Greenwald Doherty, Doherty. So there's information about a firm and a way to contact me, or they can email me at my initials, DL, at Greenwald, GreenWald, LLP.com.
Okay.
DL at greenwaldllp.com. Gotta love, gotta love, gotta love.